Okay, so what if everything you've been taught about success is basically a lie? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty radical framework for modern power, and it's all drawn from the YouTube channel Dark Power. The idea is that to really succeed, you have to combine two ancient and what seem to be completely opposite philosophies. Now, this is a pretty intense take, so let's just dive right into the source material.
So, right off the bat, the source hits you with this statement. It argues that you've been lied to. This whole idea that patience and being a good person will always win out. According to this view, that's just propaganda. It claims that while you're sitting around waiting for good things to happen, the ruthless and the strategic are out there taking everything. It's a pretty stark way of looking at the world, for sure.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the core thesis from the source material. It argues that we're all asking the wrong question. It's not about choosing to be either the Stoic philosopher or the Machiavellian prince. The real goal, is to become both. You use one philosophy to control yourself and the other to control the world around you.
So first, let's break down what the source actually calls the lie. It's that conventional wisdom we all hear, right? Be humble, stay quiet, wait your turn, play nice. But the argument here is that this advice isn't actually designed for your success. It's designed to keep you passive and, well, easy to control.
The source basically says, just look around. The people who are truly winning aren't always the nicest or the most patient. They're not waiting for the universe to just hand them a reward for their inner peace. No, they're described as calculating, observant, and they make their moves in silence. In this view, the rules are totally rigged against anyone who follows them blindly.
Now, what's really crucial here is the warning that's presented. The source is super clear about this. If you adopt either of these philosophies by itself, it's a recipe for disaster. Pure Stoicism, it claims, just makes you a passive victim. Sure, you'll have inner peace, while the world outside just tears you apart. On the flip side, Machiavellianism without that Stoic discipline, that just makes you reckless, impulsive, and in the end, totally predictable. Which brings us right to the core concept of this whole framework, the combination. The source presents this as a powerful synthesis, where each philosophy has a very distinct, very critical purpose. One becomes your shield, and the other becomes your weapon. And this slide, it just lays it out perfectly, right? Stoicism is your shield for internal control. You master your emotions, you become completely unshakable. Machiavellianism, that's your weapon for external control. You use strategic ruthlessness to become unstoppable. See how that works? One makes you unbreakable on the inside, the other makes you a force to be reckoned with on the outside.
So the source gives a nod to this classic Stoic idea from Marcus Aurelius. It admits, yeah, it's beautiful, it's poetic, and it's true. But, and this is a really big but, it argues that in the world we live in today, it is critically incomplete. Having power over your own mind is the foundation, but it's not the whole building. And then, bam! It contrasts that Stoic ideal with this quote from Machiavelli. This, the source claims, is the reality of how power actually works. It's not about some lofty philosophy in a marble hall. It's about understanding the cold, hard mechanics of influence and respect out in the real world.
Okay, so let's get tactical and see how this all builds up. We've talked about the why, so now let's get into the how, the specific rules of power, just as they're laid out in the source material.
The source introduces this term, dark psychology, and it frames it not as something evil, but as an essential tool for awareness. The argument is that these psychological triggers are already being used on you all the time, by advertisers, by politicians, on social media. So the choice isn't whether this game gets played, the choice is whether you're going to remain a pawn or if you're going to learn the rules to influence the outcome.
Now here's where things get really counterintuitive. The source calls this the power paradox. It claims that the greatest power move you can possibly make is to appear powerless. You know, that need to broadcast your strength, your intelligence, your success? That's not power. According to this view, that's just insecurity.
So, how does this paradox actually work in practice? Well, it's a four-step process. You seem weak, so people underestimate you. You use that cover to move in silence, building your power without any big announcements. Then, when the time is right, you execute. Real power, according to the source, doesn't need applause. It just acts. This might be the most advanced concept from the source ruthless compassion. It makes a really critical distinction. Being Machiavellian isn't about being cruel, it's about being effective. See, cruelty is emotional, it's weak. Ruthlessness is a tool and it's logical. And sometimes, the most ruthless and effective tool you have is kindness. But a strategic, calculated generosity that builds loyalty far stronger than fear ever could.
And this quote from Machiavelli is used to just hammer that previous point home. The source interprets this as a warning against doing things halfway, because that only creates enemies who resent you. The key is decisive action. Whether you choose generosity or elimination, the action has to be complete. That's what gets results, not resentment.
And all of this, all these rules and concepts, it all leads to the final stage of the transformation described in the source material. This is the ultimate goal of combining these two philosophies.
The source is really direct here. You cannot transform without destruction. The version of you that's always seeking approval, the part that avoids conflict at all costs, the one that always plays it safe, that version has to die. Your old, comfortable beliefs about fairness and how the world should work have to be replaced by a cold, clear understanding of how it does work.
And here it is, the before and after of this whole transformation. You shift from seeking approval to acting decisively, from reacting emotionally to staying completely detached. You stop explaining your decisions and instead you just move in silence. You no longer avoid conflict, you respond with deliberate, strategic action. According to the source, this isn't really about becoming someone new, but more about shedding all those layers of social conditioning.
So the end state is what the source calls being untouchable. It's a dual mastery. First, you're emotionally untouchable, and that's thanks to the stoic fortress you've built inside. Insults don't land, setbacks don't break you. Second, you're strategically untouchable thanks to that Machiavellian mind. You see the game, you're always 3 moves ahead, and you just can't be trapped.
And we end on this final idea from the source, which really just encapsulates the entire philosophy. The lion doesn't announce when he hunts. It's a reminder that true power is quiet, it's confident, and it's effective. It doesn't need to be loud or visible to everyone. It just acts. The source lays out the framework. What you do with it is the real question.